Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's Forbes Insights webinar, the Transformative CMO, which is sponsored by Anaplan. And before we begin, we wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console, there are multiple application widgets you can use throughout the webcast. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom. We do capture all submitted questions, so we'll be able to follow up with more information shortly after the broadcast. So do think of your questions as the presentation continues, and we'll make sure we get back to them after the presentation. And a copy of today's slide deck is available in the resource list widget. That looks like a green folder at the bottom of your screen. And you can expand your slide area by clicking on the maximize icon on the top right of the slide area, or by dragging the bottom right corner of the slide area. And if you have any technical difficulties, please click on the help widget. It has a question mark icon and covers common technical issues. So, okay, we've got the housekeeping notes out of the way, and we are pleased today to present information about the transformation happening in the role of the Chief Marketing Officer. And I'm so pleased to have with me on this conversation and dialogue about this journey that CMOs are on with Kim Whitler, who's the Assistant Professor of the Darden School of Business, University of Virginia. And Kim is herself a former CMO and is also a contributor to the Forbes CMO network. So please say hello and a few words of introduction for yourself, Kim.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm pleased to be on this call with you. I think this topic is such an important one. My research actually centers on marketing at the very top of the firm, how marketers on the board, marketing in the CEO, marketing experience at the CEO level, and how the role of marketing can actually significantly affect firm performance. And so, having been a former CMO and now kind of centering all of my research on helping CMOs be more effective, I think right now there's not a more important topic than understanding how, first of all, marketers are expected to transform organizations. This is a common expectation. It's not just transforming marketing, but it's how they can actually lead transformation across the entire organization. But then understanding how incredibly challenging it is to do that. So expectations are high for marketers. Opportunities, I think, for marketers to go beyond marketing into the CEO role and onto boards, the opportunities have never been better. But this is a hard journey. I actually don't think that there's a more difficult, more challenging role right now in the firm than that of CMO. And so the topic today is really timely.
Yeah, Kim, and I couldn't agree more. And we've actually had lots of conversations about that in the past, and how those who are sort of at the head of the line leading transformation in this role are really, as you say, positioned for further growth within the organization and perhaps even the ultimate CEO role. Before we dive into our presentation on the Transformative CMO, I wanted to provide a note of thanks to our sponsor, Anaplan. And as we know today, marketers are increasingly called upon to become responsible for much more than just traditional marketing activities, including customer service, customer experience, and sales enablement and sales support activities. And that's a lot to ask for any CMO today. And with those changes, marketing departments often struggle to keep pace, and they're swarmed on many fronts on how to manage and bring to bear all the resources that a marketer needs to in today's modern marketing organization. And the old models of sales and marketing in that way just really aren't sustainable, and they're too disconnected. And even now we talk about aligning sales and marketing, but very often much more is required. The folks at Anaplan believe to drive high performance in your business, your planning approach should be agile, disciplined, and inspire confidence. And at the core is a granularity of insight that allows you to truly understand the what and the why behind the numbers. and you need a way to quickly model change for all aspects of your business so you can change course correction on the fly. And that requires a platform and a way to access multiple points of data in one usable and actionable dashboard. And by connecting your plans and engaging with your business stakeholders in a more insightful way, you can continuously optimize the performance of your business and ultimately achieve your organizational goals. I will sort of do the play-by-play announcement as we move along. What I will do is present some of the research that we've conducted over the past ongoing now 2 years around this concept. But it really comes down to transformation is one of those incredibly perhaps overused words, but it just happens to be a word that is true. We do indeed live in transformative times. The challenges around not just the marketing role, but organizations in general as they are all on this journey around, particularly around digital transformation. And research that Forbes Insights has done shows that not just among CMOs, but this is now among CEOs research that we've done, that 93% of the Forbes Global 2000 companies are saying that they're in some phase of business model transformation. So this is not just around marketing, but marketing has a critical role in this. And we'll tell you why in a minute, why we think the CMO now ascendant in this process. And the challenge is that nearly every company is in a transformation journey, but only half of those CEOs say that they really believe that their company is well versed in transformational change. So they know they have to change, but they're not exactly sure how to change and what that change means when they get there. So we really feel this is place for the CMO to step into that role and really help lead the organization in this process, and not just lead marketing, but the organization overall. And that's a big change, as Kim alluded to in the beginning of our conversation. So in research we've done, and we asked folks of percentage of marketers who agree with the following, and these are somewhat expected, but at the same time somewhat shocking at the same time. So 47% believes their company is wasting money in executing its marketing initiatives. 51% say they are able to monetize their audience sufficiently. 56% say that they feel they're making the right media buys. So basically, the old saw about John Wanamaker is actually true as self-assessed by marketers themselves. So there's a big gap here that needs to be bridged. The changes that are happening around digital transformation are forcing companies to be more efficient, forcing more efficiency throughout the marketing supply chain. And as you can see, there's tremendous room for improvement. So how does the CMO become a growth partner? And one of the main drivers around developing this idea that the CMO can be the tip of the spear around digital transformation is data and analytics. Data is one of those aspects of marketing that I think can help sort of set the marketing department free. Everyone knows that when you're a marketer, and particularly when the role of CMO, you have a lot of experts that surround you about who seem to know better. But when you have what you are working towards, a single view of truth around the customer, driven by data and analytics, and more importantly around insight around that, then you're in a position to help lead those conversations. And this leads us to research that we partnered with Millward Brown Vermeer, with the Association of National Advertisers, with Spencer Stewart, and Adobe. And it really was one of the largest marketing studies perhaps ever conducted, over 10,000 respondents from over 70 countries, interviews with over 300 CMOs, pretty massive, really to get at to this notion that everything we're doing in marketing is changing, yet the organization, particularly the marketing construction and organization and capabilities of the marketing department probably haven't changed in 50 years. So something needs to change there. And what we found from this research, which identified aspects of marketing that are tied to high-performing companies. So it's not just what people say about themselves, but we went back and looked at the past 3 years of sales growth to correlate marketing behavior towards actual outcomes. And we were able to identify marketing high performers and marketing low performers, or if you will, winners and losers in the marketing arena. And what we found is there are 5 key drivers to help future-proof the marketing organization. And we're going to talk about the organization itself for the next few slides. Then we'll come back and talk about the role of the CMO, and Kim and I will have a dialogue about the changes that are happening, about the personal role of the CMO and how they are changing. But what this shows is that the organization needs to connect, meaning provide a 360 view of the customer and a focus on the customer experience. That is no surprise, but we know that that's easier said than done. As important as you build a culture of brand evangelism for your organization as led by the CMO, that you need to inspire the organization, but most importantly from the inside out. How can you expect to influence your customers if your employees and stakeholders don't believe firmly in the brand promise that you bring to the marketplace? It means focusing on the data and KPIs that matter to the organization, that you need to create an organization that's aligned with those goals, and then you need to build capability through really training, which we'll talk about in a few minutes as well. So those are 5 drivers that we're going to talk about and help identify sort of the difference between winners and losers. And if you recall or retain nothing else from this presentation, perhaps you'll remember this first and foremost. This was the biggest delta between overperformers and underperformers, 20 percentage points here, which is showing you that the link to business performance, and that's this focus, is that when there's a clear link to company KPIs, whatever the CEO reports to their board on, it are the same metrics that marketing is held accountable to and compensated on. There's a 20 percentage difference between high performers and underperformers. So focus on KPIs that matter to the organization as opposed to a lot of other metrics that can often be seen as somewhat proxies, but can be shiny objects, right? Like followers in social media, or even other aspects of brand health, when at the end of the day the company is held accountable for delivering revenue to its stakeholders and shareholders. So that was a key finding there. We also found that insights was a big part of it, not just data. 72% of overperformers versus 59% of the underperformers say that they believe that big data will have a high-level impact on their business. And then 45 versus 38% of those high performers versus underperformers believe they have the right data and analytics available to measure marketing effectiveness, which obviously is key if you're going to connect your marketing activity to business outcomes. And as we talked about, inspiring. So here's some data that shows the differences between the more advanced high-performing organizations and those who are not. 84% of the upper performers say that they are proud of their brand purpose, and that another 60% of overperformers versus 43% of underperformers say that they ensure that all employees are fully engaged with the brand purpose. So these seem like pretty easy places for easy wins in the organization that marketing organizations can lead to help move their organizations forward. And here when we talked about build and training capability, one of the perhaps more surprising data that came out of this, that overperformers spend 20% more days on training than underperforming organizations. And when we asked folks, and maybe we can talk about this later as well, when we asked folks the single largest percentage of those who said how many days were spent training in the marketing organization, the largest percentage was none, actually. So the bar is set pretty low. So how can you have a high-performing marketing organization when you're not making sure that they're up to date on all the latest changes in digital marketing and marketing transformation and technology and all the things that are happening in the marketing space if you're not spending time training your people? And then also breaking down silos. This is something that we hear not just in the marketing space, but this is probably the biggest impediment to moving ahead in digital transformation for the organization overall, for all aspects of the business, but particularly for marketing. And again, you can see here where when there's a closer alignment to the rest of the organization, you can see the differences for those who work closely with finance and HR and IT. There's a delta of some at least 10 percentage points or more, differentiating the high performers versus the low performers. And marketing is one of those capabilities within the organization that literally can't exist on its own. You need your partners in IT to incorporate changes in technology. You need to partner with HR if you're going to create programs that develop brand evangelism within the organization, and a belief and inspiration around your brand promise. And of course, I can't imagine that it's not even higher than this, but connecting your marketing activity to business outcomes is certainly the arena for the CFO. And if the CFO is not your best friend as a marketer, then you should spend some time doing so, or that may not be a job in which you're in for very much longer.
Bruce, just a point on that. You know, one of the things that I've seen in all the interviews that I've done and in some of the research I've conducted is that, you know, marketing is a unique function. So when I talk to the MBA students, I say, if you take marketers out of the firm, what happens? If marketing is managed correctly, well, the most visible change will be a change in growth, right? So marketers generally are demand creators. They're one of the only functions that focus on bringing external information into the firm and helping the firm adapt to the external environment. Almost all other functions, if you think about it, finance, accounting, HR, operations, most of them are inwardly focused. Okay, they're inwardly focused. They're not going and accumulating external data and trying to adapt the firm accordingly. One of the challenges, though, here is I'd love to see the data from the other perspective. So how aggressive, because part of this is the role of marketing, not just the CMO, but the role of marketing within the firm. Unfortunately, there are a lot of CEOs and a lot of firms from a historical standpoint that believe that marketing is nothing more than promotion generators. And so when the role is marginalized like that, it's very difficult, no matter how competent the CMO is, to be able to come in and transform the role before they have the ability to transform the company. And in fact, if you have a transformative CMO who walks into a circumstance like that, where they're trying to affect change, and yet the firm doesn't want it, the CEO doesn't want it, the rest of the organization isn't prepared for it, then they're actually setting themselves up for failure. I recently, this is about a year ago, I talked with an individual who came from a P&L background. He had been a general manager, and he walked into a CMO role. And he was told he was there to transform this company. This is a very large Fortune 500 company. He was there to transform the company, but the company was not prepared for a marketer who operated like a P&L manager. And he was there for about a year and a half, and then he was let go. And it's not that he could not have transformed the company. It's that the company was not prepared for him. Now, part of, you could argue that he needed to adapt better to the organization. He maybe needed to throttle back and perhaps go at a slower pace, et cetera. But the company said one thing, but they were not prepared for what a real transformer, could have done for the firm. They weren't prepared for it, and they kind of rejected him. And so I think, part of this is the CMO being prepared to be a transformer, but a very big part of it also is finance being prepared for the CMO to be a transformer, and HR being prepared for the CMO to be a transformer, et cetera, in order for them to really be effective.
That's a great point, and I've heard those situations in my conversations with CMOs as well. It's sometimes for organizations, careful what you wish for, right? The remit is to bring in a CMO who's going to transform the organization, make it a digital-first company, all those things. But you're right, the culture is not prepared for that, and sometimes that leads to sort of a rejection of that, despite the fact that everybody says that's what they want. It's a great point, Kim. So getting back to the sort of organizational change, here's a organization chart that could have been the same 50 years ago, maybe even longer, right? The kind of head of marketing, whatever the title it was, although the CMO title is probably only about 15 years old. Product and strategy, advertising, public relations, right? All the typical things in a sort of hierarchical construct. Yet so much is changing so fast that what the research would imply around organizational change and marketing capability is perhaps something that's more matrixed. And we'll get into this as we talk about the characteristics of the CMO role itself. But this idea of sort of the CMO in the middle of a matrixed organization in which people come together to solve a particular problem. You bring best of class, best of breed people, maybe sometimes even throughout the organization, let alone within the organization, to help solve problems and not rely as much on a strictly hierarchical organization. So when we talked about capabilities and those 5 constructs, we're saying think about organization around those who are sort of at the tip of the spear for operations, those who do, right? Those who are creating content, those who are running marketing operations, who are connecting those operations to real-time marketing. Then there are those who are connecting through what we're calling thinkers, the strategy, the insight and analysis and data people. And then those who have skills around empathizing and connecting with customers. They're brand engagement and evangelists. They're focused on customer experience. And again, none of these exist in a silo, and they can't succeed without having connections to one another. So the implication is think about your organization more horizontally than hierarchically. And that sort of led this whole conversation and research around, okay, what are the characteristics for CMOs who are at the head of this journey? And as it happens, we conveniently took this acronym, the Transformer CMO, so that you could sort of easily remind yourself of these characteristics. And this is not in a order of priority, if you will, because they're all equally important. But one of these things, and this goes back to brand promise and inspiration, is this concept of transparency. The idea that the customer journey has changed. Customers know as much, if not more, about you as an organization, more about your products, more about your service record, more about your supply chain, more about your commitment to sustainability than many within your own organization. So how do you transform your organization for an era of radical transparency in which the idea of spin is dead, which was the idea of kind of what PR was at one point, to the idea of really amplifying your truth, or kind of the truth well told, to kind of steal from an old tagline from the New York Times. So how does this feel, and are you seeing this in some of the work that you've done, Kim, in talking to CMOs and the academic work?
I think this is really interesting, because underpinning the notion of transparency, I think, is the fact that employees and consumers have changed as much as technology has changed. We always talk about technology and the shift in technology and how that's affecting companies, but rarely do we talk about what's happening to consumers. And what I mean by this is, if you go back 25 years ago, I did research back in the late 80s, early 90s, and celebrity endorsements rated very highly. There was nobody higher other than a friend or family member on a recommendation than celebrities. I did similar research in the late 2000s, and that had changed. And now celebrities weren't nearly as important as actually experts. Well, what changed? Consumers have gotten much more skeptical. Consumers talk about brands. Consumers are savvy about marketing. I was recently on a vacation, and I had, the kind of traditional 1980s, 70s style sales pitch being thrown at me. Very inauthentic, and it's just not contemporary. Consumers today, and you see this on college campuses, students are jaded. Authenticity, advertising, communication that is genuine and real and authentic and rooted in truth, it goes beyond marketing to how you interact with young people, how you interact with millennials, how you communicate with employees. This is a shift in consumerism and in employee expectations that pervades everything. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of companies are not adapting fast enough to this. There's a lot of emphasis on digital, a lot of emphasis on data. Again, those are internal elements, not as much awareness, discussion, focus on how consumers over the long term have changed in their savvy and sophistication, and how things that worked in 1970 to change consumers' mind simply will not work today. And an approach to authenticity is much better. I can't remember, was it Domino's, when the CEO of Domino's came on a TV ad and said, look, our pizza hasn't been as good as it should be. I thought, wow, that's a breakthrough kind of moment, because he's being authentic and worthy then of trial. He didn't try the stuff that we did in the 1970s. He's talking to consumers from a very genuine, real place. And I don't know how that campaign performed, but at the time, from a marketing perspective, I thought that's going to, I think, connect more with younger people today than kind of the traditional advertising approach. So I think this transparency is pervasive. I think it goes well beyond even promotions and communication to how you manage your employees, a very critical underpinning of success.
Right, particularly for millennials and Gen Z as well. That has resonates particularly with them. It resonates with everyone, but particularly with that generation. And also, part of transparency is sort of making sure that information is accessible to a wider group of people in the organization, and data plays a role in that. And certainly, our friends from Anaplan have a capability to help provide a viewpoint for a centralized view, a single system of record that the CMO and a dashboard can look at. Next, this is something that a lot of people talk about, but it's hard to it's hard to actualize, right? Because your customers are in real time. They are connecting with you, with your competitors. They're always on through their mobile devices, through their various media channels, through their points of access throughout the day, 24/7. So is your marketing there to connect them when they are ready to accept information from you? And another aspect of the performing organization and the Transformative CMO is building an agility to the organization. And Kim, maybe you have some perspective on this, but the idea, and to some extent this comes from the world of software development, right? Which is that you're in a constant state of developing your next release, as opposed to building up a sort of a one-time effort to build a campaign that you then unfold throughout the year, right? This is consistently and continually changing based on information that can help you iterate marketing capability throughout the year.
You know, it's interesting, Bruce. In my CMO Insights series that I've been writing for Forbes, I ask a question: what is the biggest challenge that keeps you up at night? And one of the most common answers is the need to move faster.
Right.
And a good example of this, I published an article from an interview I did with Jim McGinnis, he used to be EVP at Activision, now runs a division at Intuit. But his formative training was at Procter & Gamble, and he compared and contrasted, what today's companies need, and he really, frankly, contrasted it with P&G and how slow and how purposeful and how careful they were. He said, you just can't do that today. You have to be able to move faster, and yet you're on you're on a tight wire. So at the same time that you let up on rules and you enable people to make decisions faster, because agility means you push decision making lower in the organization, you empower people, you take greater risks. There's this countering side, and he used social media as an example. He said, at a big company where they want to check every single tweet, we can't operate that way anymore. He said, so that means I have to empower my employees to tweet on their own. Well, that means I'm increasing the risk to the firm. And so now how do I build in the processes and the systems and the checks and the training to reduce the risk and, oh, by the way, plan for the downside? So if you can't control it so that everything's perfect, then you have to assume that mistakes will be made. And how do you put in systems, processes, and procedures so that if a mistake is made, you can jump on it very quickly and fix it? This is for large companies that have been used to a control, command, perfection, no risk sort of a mindset, this is a very difficult shift to make. And what I liked about the interview with Jim is that he really talked about how you step into the role as an enabler of agility for the firm while also protecting the company. You want to try to minimize the risk when you dial up the agility. And it's so important, but the more agile you become, the faster you move. The fewer the checks and balances, the greater the risk. And so it's this teeter-totter that you're trying to balance.
No one said it was easy, right? But
No.
it's critical to success in today. It's moving quickly. Absolutely.
Yes.
Another characteristic is networks. That is marketing leaders who understand the power of networks, not just social media, not just the power of mobile networks, not just the power of distribution channels, but even the opportunity, if not, I would say the obligation for CMOs to be at the head of this, to promote their capability and their expertise in their marketplace through developing their own networks.
You know, Bruce, this is one area where this is very challenging. One of the biggest questions I get from CMOs when they call me up is, do you know a vendor who does X? We're now in a world where there, it seems like, are millions of vendors with all sorts of solutions. And most marketers today need a lot of outsourced help, right? They need experts in a variety of different areas. And one of the biggest challenges is identifying the right outsourced vendors to solve important problems. You know, I know Gartner is a help in this area because they oftentimes have lists of vendors and rankings of vendors. But this is a big need that I mean, I just got another email from a board member a week ago saying, do you know a vendor who can do this for our company? So when we think about networks, a lot of times we think, you know, CMO to CMO, but one of the most powerful things is becoming very adept at which vendors, which suppliers are the best in certain areas. And, you know, at some point it might be a good, interesting article to write for Forbes because this is an area that CMOs need help in.
Yeah, actually, we've just recently released some research on that, and that for another time, but we basically winnowed down over 1,000 technology solutions down to 13 major marketing platforms and 100 best-of-breed brand publishing technology vendor solutions. So that was something that CMOs that I talked to, and I have the chance to speak to hundreds over the course of the year, they've asked, you absolutely right, they've asked for help in that. Because otherwise, you know, you can chase a lot of solutions. There's a new solution every day. As we talked about focus, again, this idea of connecting marketing activity to business outcomes. No surprise there. That's a key aspect of the performance marketer and the transformative CMO. This is a key concept that comes up over and over again. The idea that the CMO is an orchestrator of marketing initiatives as opposed to me, the difference between orchestration and delegation today is that the CMO has to know more about the marketing capability that they are incorporating into their organization than ever before. And they don't have to be an expert themselves. They need to hire the best people for the organization, but they have to know enough to know whether they are incorporating the right capability. And I liken it to a conductor at an orchestra. They have to be an expert in every instrument that's in the orchestra, but they don't have to be a virtuoso. Hopefully you have a virtuoso in every aspect on your team. And as we've had this conversation before, Kim, you don't have to be a virtuoso in the bassoon, but you have to know what a bassoon sounds like, and you have to know if they're on the same page with the rest of the orchestra.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you go back to the 5 drivers that you meant, 2 were connect and inspire, and I think one I would almost kind of aggregate those and talk about influence. And you know, when I talk to CMOs who are failing, okay, and what I mean, they're struggling to adapt to the company, etc. A large part of the ability to transform a marketing department or the firm is the ability to influence their peers, right? So they have to earn the trust of their peers. They have to, the peers have to believe that they should, you know, that the CMO is worthy of being followed. And so this notion of building influence, which is so difficult, first of all, it takes time. You can't walk into a company and have the right to change things unless the CEO gives you that right and makes it clear to all of your peers. Short of that happening, you have to come in and influence. And this is this orchestration concept, which is is you have to be able to figure out how to first earn the right to be the conductor, right? That the head of finance isn't going to give you that role. The head of merchandising isn't going to let you play that role. You have to earn that role, and the way that I think you earn it is by helping them succeed, right? And through helping others succeed, then you earn trust. You earn the right to be listened to. You earn the right to be followed. This is why I think the way in which the CMO enters a new role is so critical. Because if they are told, and I have yet to hear a CMO who says that they were told that they were going to be an incrementalist, that they were offered a new job and the CEO said, gosh, I just want you to come in and continue doing what's been done. Almost all jobs are pitched as transformational roles, but very few are set up for the CMO to be a transformer. And so this is where, I go back to I love your star visual, think, feel, and do. So they have to not only be intellectual in figuring out what the right strategy is, but they have to have the EQ to be able to come in and assess the organizational situation and dynamics, understand how to achieve influence in that organization without authority. Because very rarely does the CEO say, I'm anointing the CMO to change the firm, you must all follow him or her. They don't do that. And so this notion of playing in a conducting role requires that the orchestra actually follows you and is willing to play to your lead. And that is not given to you. You have to earn that right, and it takes time. And that's why part of being an effective transformational CMO is managing the CEO's expectations, being clear about the path to achieving whatever the CEO expects, asking the CEO to play a role in this, right? You need support. And so this feeling part of the job, part of it's thinking, knowing what to do. The other part is figuring out how to get it done within a specific firm context. And that part requires tremendous EQ. This is, again, why I think this job is one of the hardest. You have to be extremely analytical, but you have to have tremendous EQ. And it's not common that everybody has both of those in spades.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It is a challenging role, which is many of the aspects that one, as we said right at the outset, is more associated with a CEO-like role, leadership role. So the idea of culture and leadership, I think you're right, is really a critical part of this orchestration notion. In the few minutes we have left to discuss this, some other key characteristics, certainly relevance, creating communications that are not just right for the target, but are in the right context, that you are focused on measuring everything. Not everything will matter, but if you're not in the process of measuring, you don't know what are the data points that measure, that you leave an important part of your capability and budget to experimentation. How can you do things differently and new and innovative if you're not trying something that's never been done before? And that's experimentation and the idea that it's okay to fail. It's not okay to fail. Often it's okay to fail, learn from it, iterate, and do more of what works and less of what doesn't. But experimentation is key to that. And then, of course, lastly, everything has to be focused on return on investment. If there's not a strong connection between your marketing activities and business outcomes, as we said at the beginning. And of course, tools that you need to help bring these together, and tools like those offered at Anaplan can certainly help in that orchestration and measurement and ROI to connect data to develop the insights so that you can manage and connect your marketing activities to real business outcomes. So where do you see this process, Kim? Where do you think we are in this process? Is this a sort of transitional moment for the CMO? Will this not be a transformation moment that we'll talk about in 10 years from now, or is this something that you think that's going to continue for some time?
No, I think we are in a transition. I think, you and I have talked at length about in the 1980s and even early 90s, marketers who came from ad agencies were very popular in the CMO role. That shifted a lot. I predict in the future you're going to see more CMOs coming from consulting roles. Why? Because they tend to be very analytical and quantitative. So you're seeing a shift in the value. In the 1990s, it was about love marks and about feeling and empathy and very heavy on emotion. I think what you're now seeing is a very rational movement in marketing, which is around data and analysis and quantitative skills, et cetera. I actually, in my research, ironically, interestingly, the firms that have the best marketing capability have CMOs who have both very strong skills on the quant side, but very strong skills on the creative side. They have both this EQ and this IQ. They actually are both. And in fact, very analytical CMOs are in the worst performing firms. Now, this isn't cause and effect. This is just correlational. But it says to me that I think we've swung the pendulum towards quantitative skills, and I think we're going to end up back somewhere in the middle where we recognize that to be truly effective, you have to have EQ. You have to really understand how to change consumer behavior, not just know which consumers to target, not just know what they like, but you actually have to connect with them and relate to them. And so I think we're in a very interesting period where the quant skills are valued appropriately. I think we may swing back a little bit in the future to a recognition that quant without EQ is insufficient, that you need both in the marketing role. But I think this is a great time to be a marketer. The one thing I would add, and it's because I'm now teaching in an MBA program, the one thing I encourage the students to focus on, which is not their normal way of thinking, is to collect experience and wisdom. Part of being a transformational CMO is that you have to have had the experiences that enable you to do everything we're talking about here. You have to have had an experience where you understand how to develop, measure, track strategy. You have to understand how to connect your actions to ROI measures and to KPIs, as you mentioned earlier. You have to have an understanding of how to create and design an organization, right? That was one of the hardest things I had in one of my early CMO roles, was I knew that I wanted the organization to shift, but how do I create the structure, and what roles do I insource versus what roles do I outsource? How do I do that? You need that experience. And so if you focus on figuring out what experiences you need to collect to become a very kind of expert CMO at the transformational side, you're going to be much more effective. MBA students don't think that way. They think oftentimes about what job will be interesting to me. Is it in a product category that I'm passionate about? Versus looking at the skills, the training, the experience, the learning, the growth that can be accumulated. And I think that's important. We're talking about how you become a transformational CMO, but a lot of it is what do you have to do to get to a point where you can be effective.
Well, I think that's a great coda to our conversation and quite eloquently summarizing a lot of data and a lot of insights and information around what's happening with the role of the CMO. So again, thank you, Kim, for your insights. And remember to add your questions, send them to us, and we will answer them, all of those you send. And if you want to learn more, please feel free to connect with myself or Kim. And with that, we appreciate the time you've taken out of your day to spend time with us, learn about the Transformational CMO. and we appreciate our sponsor Anaplan for making this possible. So thank you again, and have a good day.